right, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the Human Services Committee meeting of Monday, March 7th, 2022. And I declare that we have a quorum present, so we can begin our business. And the first item of business is approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Of our February 7th meeting, could someone make a motion on that?
Sure, I will. I'd like to move the approval of the meeting minutes from February 7th, 2022.
Bobby, second.
Just me. Second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, no? All right. Minutes are approved. And then I'm going to do public comment as we get to each item.
Okay.
So the first item of consideration is item HS1, which is maybe Councilmember Braithwaite, you'd like to make that motion?
Gladly. Hold on one second. Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is Resolution 17-R22, designation of portion of McDaniel Avenue between Nathaniel and Greenleaf Street with the honorary street name sign William Bill Logan Jr. Way. This is for action.
All right. Can we have a second? Bobby?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Braithwaite, you want to speak to your motion?
Sure. I'm glad to support the family in this effort. I think for those of you who, if the name doesn't sound familiar, Chief Bill Logan, former Evanston Police Chief, very instrumental in a lot of activity around town. All the information is in the packet. Founder of, first black many things, first black chief. He has served the high school. He served as the founder of the Chessman Club, of FAM, ECDC, and the list goes on. So I think there will be more recognition at City Council, but definitely hoping to move this forward out of the committee based on all of his achievements as well as contributions to our city of Evanston. Thank you.
Yep. Well, I have to say, reading through the material in the packet, it's a wonder that we've not
Done this
given him
sooner.
an
I know.
honorary street name already.
Yes,
I mean, it's
yes.
very impressive contributions to the
Yes.
community. All right. Then I think, can we have a roll call on that?
Councilmember Braithwaite,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
All right. The motion carries, and we will be seeing that item on our council agenda soon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
And Councilmember Burns, would you make a motion on HS2, please?
Move approval of ordinance 9022, amending portions of the city code 9-5-20, noises prohibited.
Second.
Okay, thank you. And we have several members of the public who'd like to speak to this. Perry Weinberg? Yep. I assume that's turned on? Yep.
Good evening. Alderperson Ravel has about 178 emails from me with various levels of frustration. And I was trying to decide what to say today, and I tried to distill all that into one comment thing. So this is just a story that I'm going to read, and hopefully from this you'll understand the situation that about 40-plus families live in and how we'd like to get it fixed. So here's my compilation. You're in the backyard of your home. You've invited your mom and dad, and your kids are trying to figure out which hand and which grandpa has the candy hidden. Dinner is finished and you are sitting, talking, and visiting. Your neighbor, not that many feet away, is setting up drums, a bass guitar, a steel string guitar, and 2 microphones on stand in their backyard, right next to yours. Tonight it's their jam session. Again, they do this 4 to 5 times a week. As they crank out their first notes, everyone in your yard stops talking. Why? You can no longer hear each other. Ironically, this is often the situation in the yard over by Post 42. Resigned, we head into our house. We close the doors, we shut our windows, and the sound, especially the bass, is just as annoying. It's thumping while we're sitting in our house, and we can hear the loud notes, and we can hear the whooping and howling from our neighbor. You walk over and you ask your neighbor to turn down his music. He turns it down from a level 10 on his amplifier to a level 6, which happens to be the exact same level of sound or decibels that you hear from your car while changing your tire on 94 during rush hour. It's the same level. It's an arbitrary level, same thing. So you call the police. They come and they say that your neighbor has a permit and can keep his band pumping, not at 10, but at 6, which is the arbitrary level that was set on their permit. So they keep it going. You call and call again with no result. You talk to your alderperson over and over and over, and I didn't mention the emails too. Your empathetic alderperson says that their hands are tied because there is a permit with an arbitrary sound limit, and the current sound ordinance is ambiguous. That's why I'm here today. I love American Legion Post 42. I am a paid member of Squadron 42. I love Canal Shores. I personally rebuilt its decimated board and helped its recovery from near bankruptcy about a dozen years ago as the board president. I've lived in my home quite near the Legion Hall for 43 years. As far as I'm concerned, they can do just about whatever they want, whenever they want, just so they keep it in their footprint and don't force it upon me. It's that simple. By the way, if the situation is corrected by the city council or committee, but a special permit allows further repeated abuse, that's not a solution. Please don't fall into that trap. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want copies?
Sure. Andy Lazar?
Hi, council members. My name's Andy Lazar. I'm a homeowner who's lived in the Sicily condominiums on Central Street for nearly 20 years now. Eleanor, I hope you'll excuse me if this is a repeat of a story you've heard. I've got 42 great fellow homeowners that who are a mix of families, seniors, teachers, doctors, municipal employees, young professionals, and such that live in the building I occupy. Many of our homeowners have been living there for decades and are longtime Evanstonians. We all chose to and love to live in our Sicily building because of its unique location close to the lake, transportation, the hospital, all the green space that comes with having a golf course as our neighbor. We love Evanston and our homes. Along with our unique location comes a certain level of noise from the fire department across the street, NU football games several times a year, the L, and so forth. We all willingly and knowingly purchased our homes years ago, accepting this as part of the deal. But that has significantly changed for the worst over the last couple of years. And it has negatively impacted our owners and our neighbors in ways we could not have imagined when many of us first moved into our homes. For those of you who aren't familiar with our unique location, our building stands opposite the Canal Shores Golf Course and American Legion Post 42. It was built in 1924. We'll soon be celebrating our 100th birthday. And while we're all big fans of our building, unfortunately, its unique location stands as a catch-all for all the sound that travels across from the canal. We cannot change that. Over the last couple of years, we've witnessed shocking and steadily disturbing increases in the use of our neighbors' property, not a few hundred feet from our homes. What was once a quiet golf course and a hall for veterans to commiserate has rapidly degraded into a local watering hole and an outdoor concert venue. The last 2 years have been awful. It's been filled with dozens of amplified events and late-night drinking on that property, our neighbors' property. These events are taking place on weekdays, weekends, at all hours, and in all 4 seasons. They involve late-night revelry on the golf course, public intoxication, and honestly, just loud music and yelling, often going on well past midnight. We've been in nearly constant communication with Alderman Ravel for the last 2 years regarding this degrading situation. Countless calls by our homeowners to the Evanston Police Department that are on record, and many sleepless nights. Our owners are frankly exhausted from fighting this for the last 2 years. Owners that have had to close their windows all summer long, turn appliances down just to drown out the noise, seniors that are relocating for our homes to their children's homes on weekends just to avoid the noise. Family gatherings have been canceled. Hospital and other professionals who need to be up early in the morning are losing sleep. I won't go on. We fully understand that our neighbors across the canal have a right to remain viable, but we can also not accept trading our right for peace for their financial success. We didn't sign up for this, and we're pleading for your help. So in short, we fully support Alderman Ravel in any efforts that the City Council might endeavor to help us to gain our peace in our homes back. We fully support this amendment to the noise ordinance as one of the many ways we can accomplish this goal, which should include, in our opinion, limits on the types of events and how many of them there are per year in this area. We sincerely hope you agree to this amendment to help us and other Evanstonians to maintain the right to peace. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Alderman Ravel.
You might want to use your microphone.
Sorry, thank you. I wanted to provide just a bit of a discussion about the proposed amendments and then open it up to conversation from the rest of the committee. So the first paragraph you notice in the proposed amendments is basically to delete that whole first paragraph. And this is on the advice of our Corporation Counsel, because this reasonable person standard is just very subjective and very difficult to enforce objectively. So that's the reason for the striking out that paragraph. Then the remaining proposed amendments are aimed at addressing the issues that you've just heard discussed by members of the public. So basically, the current noise ordinance focuses on the location of the loudspeaker or amplifier. So if the amplifier is at least 150 feet from a residential property, then the sound can be as loud as the person operating the equipment desires. So the amendment would change that from focusing on the location. It would focus on the sound level being generated. It would say that the sound reaching a person 750 feet away from the amplifier should be no louder than that of a normal conversation, which is between roughly 50 and 65 decibels. And this distance was chosen because it's roughly the distance between the Post 42 patio and the condominium building across the canal. Then the next subsection would say if you do want to have an event with a loudspeaker or amplified music, that you should get a permit. And we have a longstanding loudspeaker permit, and so they would just be acquiring that permit. There's a copy in our packet. And then I've decided realized in the last couple of days that one additional amendment is needed, a new subsection 5, and basically it would say something like, provisions in this section do not apply to events sponsored by organizations that have obtained a special event permit approved by the City Council. And I think we should consider that, because that would apply to concerts like our space concerts, which have become basically a community summer tradition. So that's the rationale for what you're seeing here in the explanation, and I open it up to committee members for comments. Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Ravel, one, for reaching out to me earlier about this. I've had conversations with a number of folks about this, and I've done a lot of thinking, and One, Chief Eddington, I was actually signaling for you, so if Chief Eddington, I know you're in the Aldermanic Library, if you want to pop it, oh, there you are. Thank you. And Ms. Ozarigbo, this may be a question for you as well, so whoever, but I think Chief Eddington, you can answer this. So when we set an ordinance, such as the noise ordinance, are all of our ordinances prohibiting certain behavior? Is that then an arrestable offense?
It's a citable offense, sir.
What if there's no penalty listed? How do you cite if there's no penalty?
I'll defer to the legal department, but I would think that if the ordinance is properly constructed, there has to be a penalty phase.
Thank you. I think that's actually correct. Ms. Ozarigbo?
Good evening, members of the committee, Deputy City Attorney Michelle Ozuribo. So, Councilmember Reed, your question is whether that violating an ordinance is you receive a citation, or what's the?
Yeah, so I guess what is the penalty of violating this ordinance as it stands today?
To like what's on a C ticket? It's a regular citation. I'm trying to understand the question too, so I'm just asking for clarification because we're all.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what the penalty for violating this ordinance is.
It's a regular C ticket. Okay.
If I may, council member, I think it's a regular C ticket that there's going to be a monetary amount. However, from the parts of the conversations I've gleaned thus far, if there's a city permit for an activity, it's kind of outside the scope of our authority to then cite someone if they're saying, here's my permit, I'm following the rules.
Sure, but the ordinance as constructed, the rule says noise prohibited if it, meets a certain criteria that we would then get rid of. So I just want to be sure from Ms. Ozarigbo, our city attorney, what is the penalty? What is the fine that can be issued?
Sure, I'll have to look into what the actual fine would be, but it would be a citation as far as issued with violating the ordinance. Wouldn't be an arrestable offense.
And just to interject, our loudspeaker permit application does have language that says if police department reserves the right to request immediate shutoff of amplification based on neighborhood complaints. So a lot of it is basically complaint driven and then up to the police officers responding to decide what to do about the noise.
To a degree, but if please
Okay.
project yourself into the police officer who's responding to this call.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to clearly an organized event. They have a permit, and so now he's going to take it upon himself to shut down what he perceives to be this public gathering that's been authorized by some part of the city, said this was okay to do, but now I'm going to say this ain't a good idea. And so I think that we really need to roll this back to the permitting process rather than depending on which officer goes out and says, well, I like rock and roll, it sounds fine to me, or you send out Rich Eddington, who has a little bit of a hearing loss, he says, it doesn't seem that loud to me. We're depending on a perception of someone who shouldn't be put in that position. And so from listening to the conversation, I think we have to roll this back to the permitting process and establish criteria. And I understand completely what the neighbors are saying. If 6 is still rattling my fillings, we need to do something else. And understand that it's impacting on their quality of life. But I don't want to put this on the beat officer who's responding to a call for service. Frankly, we're out of our depth. Let the permitting process do this. Then we can use the noise meters to measure if they're within bounds.
Okay.
Well, that actually may be a follow-up question. So do we have decimeters? Does the police force have the proper equipment to gauge the level of noise?
I think we did in 2018. I'll have to check, sir. I will check on that and get back to you.
Okay, well, the first thing I'd like to do...
Councilmember Reed, could we just, our legal, we have a
Sure.
comment from legal.
Thanks, Madam Chairperson. So I did get a chance to follow up to see what the actual fine would be for a violation of this section. So under the city code, it would be section 9-5-20. And a violation in this section would be punishable by a fine not less than $100 nor more than $500 for the first offense, not less than $150, no more than $500 for a second offense, and then not less than $200, no more than $500 for a subsequent offense committed within 1 year of the first offense. So that would be the punishment structure for the violation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Reed.
Yeah. I have a number of reservations or concerns about this, but one thing I do want to get on the books that I think we can all agree on is that as what our Corporation Council wanted us to avoid, which is having a loosely constructed ordinance that was left up to discretion rather than a hard and fast rule. I would like to see us amend the section that says as to be louder than an average conversational level at a distance of 75 or 750 feet from the property line to say at a level, Councilmember Ravel and I discussed this earlier, there's, decibel, folks who've measured, kind of average decibels for a certain noise, and, a quiet office is about 50 to 60 decibels. Normal conversation is 50 to 65 decibels. Laughter is about 60 to 65 decibels, and a vacuum cleaner or hair dryer is about 70 decibels. I would imagine that somewhere between the 60 to 70 decibel, a dishwasher, for example, is 75 decibels. A washing machine, which I just had going earlier, is 78 decibels. City traffic noise is about 80 decibels. So I wonder do we want to set this as opposed to just normal conversational level? I'm going to move that we set a decibel rate of, I'd move that we set it at 65 decibels as opposed to the kind of vague language of conversation.
Okay. So that's, you're making.
Yeah,
an
so I'm
amendment.
moving that we amend.
Okay, and so it would read, in such a manner as to be louder than 65 decibels at a distance of 750 feet.
Correct.
Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second just to discuss it, but I have questions.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Burns.
And Councilmember Ravel, we talked about this earlier, but is this continuous? Right, because in our conversation we said that, okay, the loudspeaker could be at 1 decibel, and then maybe it peaks every time the host says something, and so is this continuous? Is it if it happens once? And I'm thinking about again a responding police officer, or hopefully at some point a community. When we adopt a community responder model, that it is an unarmed person doing this. But either way, there's someone that has to go out and understand how to apply this ordinance. So I just need a little help understanding how that will work. Is this continuous sound at a certain level? Is it a peaking sound?
Councilmember Braithwaite, do you have an answer to that question?
I don't. I know So two things. First, in terms of the decibels, that's something that can be measured on your phone on an app. It's not a part of the packet, so I'm just a little bit reluctant to adopt that so quickly without having a clear understanding of what those values mean, because that is something that's measurable. So I'm not opposed to it, but I think I don't like doing things on the fly, and I think we would all want a little bit more information. I wanted to use my time to get a little bit more understanding from the neighbors, and I've said this before, the noise and the things that happen in town contribute to the vibrancy. I live in close proximity to the high school, and there's an event there almost every single week. And I know that neighbors are tolerable of that because we understand that it's their kids' functions, just as if you lived close to a train station or stadium, whatever the case may be. I'm not ignorant to the fact of noise, and you are entitled to a quality of life just like any other resident. So I was more leaning into understanding the distinction and making sure neighbors were understanding of the distinction between an event that's permitted versus what I can't recall someone described as loud noises coming from a golf course at all hours of the night. I definitely see it. I see a difference between that versus an event that is permitted, and we understand that there are concerts just as there are concerts and activities all around town. So I guess I was looking to you, Alderman Vell, or just a nod from the neighbors that everyone is okay with that, because my concern is if we pass something like this, I'm thinking, again, events at Evanston Township High School, attend events that happen all around towns that involve kids and being loud. I'm also thinking I have parts of downtown Evanston where they do concerts during the nights on certain days and activities where everyone gets to participate. So I want to be supportive of the neighbors who have come to you, but I also want to be mindful of all the activities that go on around the city. So I know that you're going to talk about that a little bit later, and once we make that distinction, it will help me to feel comfortable supporting this, because I want to make sure that you're providing your residents who voted for you the support that they need.
Right.
So that's where I was leaning towards, if
Yeah,
that makes
because
sense.
it's important to remember we have at least two kinds of permits. We have the loudspeaker permit,
Yes.
which has been in place for a long time. And then we have special event permits that come to the council for approval. And so I would think, given that we've got that element of city council approval, that those events would be exempt from this
Okay.
provision, because they get extra scrutiny as it is. So the real question is these, I can call them an event, but they're much more informal.
Yes.
And so we're trying to address the noise that comes from those. So, because Post 42 rents out its facility for people who want to have birthday parties, et cetera.
Right.
And they often want to have a band, for example. And so this is, one section of this is trying to address those more informal kind of events. And those would be the ones that would just merely get a loudspeaker permit, and those are handled administratively by our Parks and Rec staff.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for making that distinction.
Right. Councilmember Reed, should we go back to you?
Yeah, well, the motion on the floor is still about the decibels. So, I mean, if there are other council members, I think, this, I didn't make up 65 decibels, nor did I do my own, like independent research going around collecting conversations and measuring. This is just research that has been done. It's very clear that, laughter, normal conversation is about at 65 decibels. And so rather than leaving the language vague, I think prescribing something hard and fast that we can measure and actually hold people accountable to is the best way to do that. So that's the reason for the amendment. I have other things, but I do want to deal with that first, since that's on the floor.
Yeah. And I've looked at a number of other communities and how they handle this, and several of them do use a decibel limit. Others are more in the vein of the conversational level. So there are, a variety of ways to handle this. But I don't quite know how to respond to Councilmember Burns' question. I mean, because certainly the bands that our neighbors are listening to, they fluctuate a lot, but the overall impact is higher than conversational level. So I don't know.
Just know we discussed on the call that if in other past instances, a officer responds, when they get there, it's not reading, higher than whatever the allowable amount is. And so I just think we need some language to give some direction to responding officers in those situations.
Well, when the officers responded last summer, the allowable decibel level was much higher than what we're talking about here, I think. I mean, or somewhat higher. So I do worry about whether 65, I mean, I know all the literature that you and I have been looking at says 50 to 65 is conversational level, but 65 I'd be more comfortable with 60, I think.
And then just understanding that I think Councilmember Reed said a hair dryer is higher than obviously the normal speaking voice, and so do these readers are they able to single out noise? So who's to say a completely unrelated noise in the immediate area isn't being picked up by this reader while at the same time the event is going on?
Well,
I don't understand the
right.
technology enough to know
Right.
how it distinguishes between what's happening all the way over there and what's happening in that immediate area. So that's
Right.
another concern that I have.
Having walked around the Cecilia building on numerous occasions with a sound meter, I mean, basically, you can hear when the train goes by and you see the meter react, and you can distinguish that very easily from the music part. So, and it's been 85 dBs when I've been over by Cecilia.
So you wait until what you feel is kind of static baseline level, and then you take it,
Right.
and then you determine it based on that. Okay.
I would think so, yeah.
Sorry.
So, Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Councilmember Ravel. And maybe something that I suggest, I mean, this is an important thing to get right. I hear it from the residents, and I know you always try to do what's best for your constituents, as we all do. I think it might be in our best interest, because I don't want to have to try to figure this out tonight. I think that if we push this back to our staff, clearly there are metrics for measuring the noise, and if the neighbors can be understanding maybe for one more month, that we have a chart that we can read and then all get an understanding and on the same page, then I think it's something that's valuable. Again, my concern is rushing to something that's going to have an impact citywide, just given all the events that we have across town, and everyone has to deal with this. So I want to kind of measure twice and cut once, if
Sure.
that makes
Right.
sense.
It
And I
does.
think, Councilmember Reed, you bring up a very good point and a good metric that's less objective and that everyone can understand, and just that when we pass it, it makes sense. So that would be my request, to be able to support that we come back with a clear chart that makes sense, that the police all have an understanding, and then we pass something that's not only fair and equitable to your residents, that can be a good template in the event that we have other places around town.
Right. I think that's a good suggestion. Councilmember Reed.
Well, I
I
don't know where the read of the full, I mean, there's only 3 other members, so, but what I will say is, I think that's fine. I do want to bring up a few other things as we think about this, to Councilmember Braithwaite's point about how, one of the things I often try to do is look at it like with my my imaginary law degree that hangs up above my mantle, that is also imaginary, and look at it judiciously. And I wonder, for example, I think about Northwestern and all of their games, and every single game at Northwestern is going to produce noise that is over whatever decibel we set that we think is reasonable, and it's going to emanate more than 750 feet away from that property. And are we just saying, would this ordinance, if we adopted this ordinance as it is now, it would essentially ban any activity at that stadium? And so I think we need to design the ordinance in a way that accounts for that. And then the question is, do we include in the ordinance an exemption for the U2 district? But then does that create are folks going to be upset that there's special rules for Northwestern and not, the same rules for the rest of the town? And so I think we do need to figure out how we address that concern, as well as the concerns of the neighbors here. And yeah, and then also to the decibel thing, I think we need to have a hard and fast, something that is easy to measure in concrete, rather than, I think we need to move our laws away from being subjective and being completely, as much as possible, objective.
Councilmember Burns.
I think that there's enough support up here for the fact that we need a decibel amount. I think more so what's being suggested now is to hold off and consider this a bit more. But I think there's support up here for the decibel. But the question I have does Northwestern do the special use permit or special events permit?
No.
Or no?
No,
Okay.
they just have football games.
Okay. And then, and I only say that because it seems like the special events permit works well when you know what the schedule is for that upcoming year. So that might be something that they could do and wouldn't be a big burden for them to do. Understanding that one of the exceptions that you just described is that this wouldn't apply to people who fill out those special events
Point of
permits.
information on that. It's the zoning that allows for them to have the games there. And so to create a special use, it wouldn't be a special use because it's already by code. They're allowed to have those games. So just to clarify that.
And then, is there anything in this ordinance that that distinguishes between like outdoor events and me with a loudspeaker in my home? We talked about this earlier. I've read it now again, and I don't see anything that distinguishes between the two. So maybe Council Ozaribo, if you can help me with that. Does this mean that someone with a loudspeaker in their home has to get a permit, or I don't want to too strictly apply it, but I mean that's I don't see a distinguish between a loudspeaker in a home and an outdoor event with a loudspeaker.
So just, good evening again, Deputy City Attorney Ozaribo. So reading section F2 in the proposed, or section 2, subsection F2, it looks like it's not distinguishing between where the speaker is located. It's the impact of the noise. So
If I can jump in to answer his question specifically, no, the noise, the emanation, I don't know if I'm making up a word, of the noise spreading 700 feet is not, would be covered by this. But to your question about if I'm got my record player at home going, do I need a permit? No, because here under section 4, it says any outdoor area. It does specify that the permit is for outdoor areas. So if my speaker inside my house is blaring 750 feet at whatever decibel rate that we set by this code, then yes, I would be able to be fined or whatever, held accountable under this code. Just wouldn't need a permit for that if I was indoors.
Do you have any other questions?
No, that's all. Thank you.
So if I can summarize where I think we are, and I'll be asking for a motion, I guess, to table. And in the month until our next meeting, we will think carefully and run around doing our own measurements or something to figure out what is the right decibel limit to set. We will think about unintended consequences. Are there other events that we just haven't thought of that would be prohibited or affected by this in some way, and just some time to think about all this.
Yeah.
Yes, Chief Eddington.
Chairperson, if I may interject, having some background in events like this, we've had similar issues with Dillo Days, and one of the things that significantly reduced the number of complaints in the neighborhood was the orientation of the speakers. And I apologize, but I have been to several concerts at the location we're talking about. If the stage were to face east instead of west, I think that might provide some immediate relief, regardless of what we do with the noise ordinance. And so I think that might, if we inject that into the permitting process, that may give them some immediate relief no matter what we decide to do with the decibels and measurements and that type of thing. Because and essentially that's what we did one time for has been established at Dillo Day. The sound's being projected out into the lake rather than into the neighborhood.
Right.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
that's mentioned specifically in the loudspeaker permit. Right. So the space concerts would be handled, though, by the special event permit rather than
Yep.
the changes that we're trying to make here. So,
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Reed.
One
go ahead.
last question about this. As we are working on this, and this will come back, thinking about Councilmember Burns' point there, it does seem as though if I were to take my even my cell phone, which has a speaker on it, and sit in my backyard and play my speaker in my backyard, and it's fairly quiet, it seems as though from our code I would still need this permit.
Yeah, which clearly we don't want to do that.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. So I think with the permit, we should also, as we're moving through this, clarify, again, what is the, I don't know how loud an iPhone or a regular speaker can get, but I think we want to make this for commercial speakers where someone's setting up the big kind of
Right.
things out in their backyard or somewhere else in the community. And so if we can figure out, maybe it's the number of, I play guitar, so I know a 50-watt amp is going to make a lot more noise than a 5-watt amp, so maybe it's I don't know how speakers work, but if it's the wattage or what the measurement, but if we can have staff thinking about that, so we are crystal clear in what we're trying to govern here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh,
And I will withdraw my motion, so we're back to the
Okay.
motion that was on the floor.
But would someone like to make a motion to table this item to our next meeting?
Sure, I'd like to move, Madam Chair, members of the committee, to table this to the next meeting, and we have staff here, Chief Eddington, to include all the things that Alderman Ravel said in terms of qualifying the decibel noise, make sure that we're harmonizing with other ordinances that monitor the sound. And I think it's also would be important to make sure that Chief Eddington and his police staff reviews, and as part of that recommendation, given the fact that they would be responsible for the citations.
Great. Is there a second to that motion?
Yeah, as long as it includes all the stuff that I was looking for too, yes.
Okay. I think we need a roll call for that.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all. And thank you, members of
you.
the public. We'll see you next month.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Where's my agenda? What's next?
Items for discussion.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. We're going to have our general assistance update, and that is with Director Ogbo.
Good day, members of the Human Services Committee. Ike Ogbo, Director for the Health and Human Services Department. At our last Human Services meeting, this particular update was provided, but we have moved it to this meeting. My belief is maybe there's some clarifications or discussions that are needed for this particular item. And I'm here to answer questions or provide clarification. The manager for the program is unavailable today, so I will do my best to answer the questions if there are any questions or discussions regarding this matter.
Okay. So the update was in our packet, and I hope everybody's read it, of Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, thank you, Director Ogbo, and thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. I have, I think it's great work that we did, the council did in November of 2020 to approve the Community Relief Fund for undocumented residents, because we want to open up that. But I do wonder if, understanding what took place during the Trump administration, if creating a separate bucket that is just for folks who are undocumented then creates a record of a whole bunch of folks in our community who are undocumented and potentially, puts them in harm if the federal government were to come in and say, show us your list of undocumented people who are receiving government money. So I would love for us to try to figure out a way to just work whatever application they have into the regular process, so there isn't a differentiation between undocumented folks and documented folks. I should say people who have that's one, particularly since it seems to have been widely used in the years since, which is a good thing.
And Councilmember,
Yeah,
Lee,
sure.
if I can address the first question or inquiry that you had about undocumented residents. The stance, even as we've had conversations with our legal department about providing such services to our documented residents, the rationale, the reason why we were able to do so during the pandemic is due to the declaration of an emergency by the state. According to federal law. So that's how we were able to provide this particular fund called the Community Relief Fund for our documented residents. If it's a service that we'll provide in the future, it will have to be reviewed by legal, and we have to take legal's direction. In that matter, if we can still provide such services for the undocumented residents once the declaration has been lifted.
Oh, so you're saying this relief was purely COVID relief for undocumented folks and will expire fairly soon, likely.
It's pretty
okay. I did not understand that, but that's a good clarification. So I think just in general, it's good to know that, because now we should be working on our general assistance and emergency assistance program to just update them to make them a bit more usable. I do, and I'll ask you this. I remember during my time as clerk, a lot of folks filtering into the office and then being filtered down to general assistance. I don't know if we still have someone who focuses on general assistance. I know it was previously. Is there someone whose job that still?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Currently, we have Indira Perkins, who is the manager for the program, and we have 3 general assistant specialists. We now call them human services specialists, who meet with clients even during COVID. They will meet in person, have video chats with these individuals providing services. So we do have a number of staff members who are tasked to undertake this responsibility for our community members.
Did we recently increase staff? Because my memory, at least from my time, was that there was one staff member who, so either we increase staff or we decrease the staff position and then put the load on 3 other people. It seems like that might have been the...
Right. For the past few years, we've had 3 GA assistants to human services.
And that's their full-time?
Yeah, that's a full-time job.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, what are some of the... Where I was going with that originally was that what I noticed that there were a lot of times where folks who needed the funds, very clearly needed, were ineligible for one reason or another, and it seemed like they may receive Social Security or something along those lines. So what are some of the barriers that still exist today that you think, that we have the power to remove to help more people? I'll leave it.
Absolutely.
May I respond to
I'm sorry.
part of that question? I just wanted to respond because I think, one of the things, and I'll just speak for myself, that I've seen a lot of value over the years, Councilmember Reed and others, if you haven't had an opportunity to do this, is typically when we respond, we're not responding to something that's hypothetical. My assumption is you're responding to a resident that has come to you and maybe has created a scenario. And I think in those situations that I've spoken to, whether it's Director Ogbo or his staff, like you gain insight, right? And the insight that you understand is when someone presents a problem, they do an amazing job explaining I'll use myself again as an example, explain to me like what that barrier is. And in most situations I've found by following up that our staff does an excellent job with addressing the issues. The other thing to your previous questions in terms of the concern of someone in the federal government, coming down to the micro level of our municipality, a lot of the funds that are paid out on behalf of GA is not passed through the individuals. It's actually, checks are written directly to whom the debt is owed to. So if it's rent, it's not paid to the individual, but it's paid directly to the landlord. If it's a utility bill, it's not paid to the individuals, but it's paid to the utility. So I think as you have these questions or issues that come up, and they do an amazing job making themselves available for you and any other one else that would have questions along this line, just to reach out directly to staff to gain those insights. And I found it very valuable.
Yeah, thank you for that.
My apologies for interrupting.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I will say that as far as Director Ogbo, if someone is undocumented, even though we pay it out to their landlord or the utility, they come in and they fill out a document that has their name, their address on it, right? And that then becomes a city record, which can then be, the federal government can request. So it doesn't, so my point there stands. And yes, I have seen it, but can you answer the question?
If I can address that
get
question.
kind of a systemic overview rather than just individual cases.
And I think it's very important that our general assistance, emergency assistance programs are housed within the umbrella of Health and Human Services Department, where we hold this information close to our hearts. We do not release information pertaining to individuals because of the sensitivity of the matter. So it's something that we take pride of, and it's something that we've embarked on. And we've received a number of FOIA requests, so to speak, regarding very sensitive matters, but it is not information that is privy to the public, just based.
Certainly, yeah,
yes,
and I'm fully aware of the FOIA laws and that. But if the federal government comes in with a subpoena because someone is violating what I think is an unjust law about being undocumented in our country, they would have every right to subpoena those documents that are very clearly delineated only for undocumented people. So I just want to be clear on that. But to the question about what are some of the barriers, systemically, not one-offs, but systemically, that you've noticed, if you can expound on that?
Well, the GA assistance program, as you are aware, is a need-based program. So we provide assistance to those who need assistance paying rent, whether it's mortgage, food assistance. People are ineligible for the program if they are part of a program where they receive cash assistance, Social Security, so to speak, disability. But we have historically provided resources and assistance to individuals whom their Social Security or disability benefits or pending. We take all of those into consideration and provide help in those types of situations.
I'm sorry, I missed the point. How do we do that?
So what I was saying is there are a number of factors that can render someone ineligible to receive, absolutely. If they are part of a cash assistance program where they are receiving cash assistance from a state or federal type of program. But historically, we have been able to provide assistance to individuals who Social Security or disability is pending, because we understand that it has not gone through and this individual needs some type of assistance from us. So we've actually been very flexible in providing those types of assistance to those individuals.
Thank you. And the rule, as far I know, general assistance, I believe, was created under state law through the Township Act. Is it our own rule that requires that excludes folks who have who receive federal benefits such as Social Security, whatever it is, or is it the state law that excludes folks?
This is a general guideline, and we follow those guidelines. And as you mentioned, that the township, which was dissolved, I believe, close to a decade, now followed some of those tenets. But in general, there is a guideline that we follow that is just not in part or largely part to Evanston. Other municipalities that have GA programs also follow the same guidelines like we do.
I just want to be clear. Guideline, statute, two different things. So is this, and if you don't have the answer right now, we can come back, but is this a guideline, as you say, or is it a law, a statute that says that we cannot accept folks or give general assistance to folks who?
So as you know, it is a mandate for us to have a GA program through the state. The guideline matter is something that I'll have to review and get back to you.
Okay.
But we have followed this guideline. Other municipalities, as I mentioned, has followed this guideline, and it's not a guideline that we have produced on our own. This guideline is something that has been created for years that other GA programs follow.
Yeah, and I'll just say in closing that if that guideline is not a hard and fast rule, I'd just love for us to look at relaxing some of those guidelines, because we know that Social Security, for a senior citizen in many cases is nowhere near what they need to survive. And if they have even the tiniest emergency, their finances are completely thrown out of whack. So just to say that, if we can still help those seniors or other folks who, obviously none of the cash benefits are sufficient. If we can offer, again, this is a small, I think folks are only able to get up to $2,000 a year in rental assistance and utility assistance $15. So it's not a ton of money. It's not a permanent kind of cash. It's a kind of one-off thing. So if we can help folks in those one-off situations where they may be in a dire situation, particularly our seniors, I'd love to see if we can do that. So
the emergency assistance we increased during COVID, just because the standard of living in Evanston increases as well. It used to be $1,500 a year. Now we increase it to $2,000. As it pertains to those who are GA clients who receive monthly stipends or monthly benefits from the city, the rental assistance is $600, and that's per month, not per year. So those people receive, as long as they're on the program and qualify, they receive their monthly benefits or monthly stipends on a monthly basis.
Oh, they can receive for more than 1 month?
Yes.
What is the cutoff for the?
Well, the cutoff on it is if they no longer qualify, and it's something that we determine to see if the person is now gainfully employed, where they can transition off the program. So there's something that we monitor on a consistent basis.
Okay, but rental assistance is almost indefinite as long as their situation hasn't
Well,
changed.
we start to have conversations.
Okay.
We start to have conversations with those individuals who've been on the program for a lengthy amount of time. But we have not kicked off anyone who's on the program just based on the length of the program. We engage with those residents and figure out a way in which we can support them, whether it is helping them find a job or some type of programs that individual can be engaged with.
Thank you. Last question. I do see here in the memo there's a lot of numbers in total spend, but I'm not seeing, and maybe I'm somehow missing it, but I'm not seeing the individual clients that we've been able to help. So am I missing that number in here, or do you have that number roughly?
Yeah, we do have that number. What is presented in the memo is a cumulative amount of money that has been spent in each program. If you take a look at GA, I believe in the tune of $500,000+ that was spent in 2021. If you look at emergency assistance, about $41,000 or $42,000. So that's cumulative.
No, yeah, that's what I got, and
Okay.
what I was just saying that is in here. What isn't is
How
do we
many?
Okay, how many clients we've
how
held?
many?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we have that information, and if that's something that I can provide you in a memo, I can do that.
Yeah, I'd just be curious to see how the number of general assistance, emergency assistance clients has ebbed and flowed, particularly 2020, 2021, and then a few years before, and then if we can, keep track of that in the years after to just, use it as another measure of the economic health of the city, if you will.
And one of the things that we've done, Councilmember Reid, is provide an update on a yearly basis. So if that's what our council members, that committee wants us to do, we can move forward in that process. Or if it's information that you want me to provide in a memo format, I can also do that.
Just to hop in real quick, I'm someone that always errs on the side of more information. I love data, and this is an opportunity to really understand how we're helping and where the need is. So definitely as much data as you can provide in these updates, the better, whether you want to do that within these regular updates or on an annual basis, once or twice, I'll leave that up to staff to decide what works best for you.
Okay,
Great.
sounds good.
And I just had one comment. I was surprised in reading this to see that it's been almost 10 years since we increased those, the utility assistance and the rental assistance. I guess I'm surprised that we don't try to do that more consistently. Is there a reason?
Yeah, it is something that we've realized, as you mentioned, it hasn't been conducted in about a decade, and especially with COVID
Right.
and the exacerbation of the needs, that we took a look into it and reviewed it and decided to, of course, increase the benefit. And that's for emergency assistance. As it pertains to GA assistance, the last market analysis that we conducted was in 2016. So it's approaching about a year where we actually had to increase the rental assistance. So it's something that we can definitely improve on by conducting these reviews, maybe on a 2-year basis or 3-year basis, just to see where we are.
Right. I think that'd be worthwhile. Great. Okay. Councilmember Braithwaite, did you have any?
No, I wanted to underscore what you said, and maybe like in the next couple of months, just to get that number out there before it comes lost in the whole budget, just based on where your year-to-date spend is, to make those recommendations. I'd welcome that. I think that's what we're all asking for, how to best deliver those services to our residents. So thank you very much for bringing it up. As well, I don't think your staff gets thank you enough for, the amazing work that you all do on a regular day-to-day basis, you and your department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on now to, do we have to vote on this?
No, it's just accept and place on file.
It's just, okay, so we've done that.
I can do a voice vote to
Okay.
actually accept it and place it on file.
Okay.
Real quick though, has Oakton resumed in-person classes or no? Because I see that the GED.
Yeah, I'll have to check in
Okay.
on that.
All right.
But most colleges and universities, of course, have resumed in class. But for those particular programs, I'll have to check in.
Yeah, because it seems like that's tied to the GED classes that we offer. We weren't
Absolutely.
going to resume them until in-person class resumes. So, okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
So did we actually move to accept and place this on file? I can't remember.
Let's quickly move
Second.
to accept and place on file.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, then can we just do all in favor?
Sure.
All right.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, thank you all. Now we're ready for a review of Evanston Police complaints and the comments report, HS1. Don't know if Chief Eddington wants to rejoin us. Yep, here he comes. Somebody, yep.
Yep. Some interesting reads this month.
Yeah. Oops. Welcome.
Welcome, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to review the 2 complaints with you.
Okay.
So we're going to start with DI 2103. And I'll go through the original complaint and some of the summary of the facts and the disposition where we are now. So DI 2103, on September 27th, 2021, the Office of Professional Standards received an email from an anonymous complainant. The complainant alleged the accused officer parked his squad car on private property and refused to move it when requested. The complaint also alleged the accused officer refused to give his name when asked. And then the OPS commander classified this complaint as a department inquiry. There were several rule violations alleged, including failure to activate the body-worn camera. Summary of the facts relating to this department inquiry: the accused officer was called to write a parking citation in the 900 block of Hinman. The accused officer parked in a semicircular driveway to not obstruct traffic on Hinman and was preparing to write the ticket. It was noted that the squad car partially blocked the sidewalk in the attempt to get out of the traffic lane. The complainant approached the squad car yelling abusive language at the accused officer. The complainant threatened to report the accused officer. In an attempt to not engage with the irate citizen, the officer simply pointed his name tag and advised the complainant it was well within his right to make a complaint. The accused officer completed the call and returned to his car and left the location without further incident. So this was reviewed. It was sent to the Citizen Police Review Commission. They reviewed the investigation. It was deemed to be complete and voted to be moved forward to this committee. And the last recommendation with regards to discipline was rules 1, 2, 51 were unfounded. Sustained was the failure to activate the body-worn camera. And again was a chef-level reprimand and review of which would have included review of the body-worn camera policy. So that is that complaint. At that point, is there any questions?
Yeah, Councilmember Reed.
So, an officer is required to, in any citizen interaction, whether it's, if they're out just walking around, a citizen walks up to them and engages in conversation with them, the officer is to turn their body camera on at that time?
It would depend on the context. If it became something more than a caretaking or community engagement function, they would have to turn it on. I believe with this incident, it was the officers should have had it on because they were taking some level of enforcement action, even though it was parking enforcement. If they would have had it on, then that would have captured the interaction with that citizen. And yes, if I were out and about, my body-worn camera on, a citizen would approach me and they were obviously irate, upset about something, I would activate my body-worn camera.
Okay, but the reason that the officer in this case needed to activate their camera is because they were doing enforcement work.
It was determined they should have activated their body-worn camera because they were handling an assigned call that did have some type of investigation and enforcement level with it, even though it was just a parking complaint, that the body-worn camera should have been activated.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I guess this is more a comment and a question. So in the past, when we've received these, typically, if it's something that happens either in your ward or you know who the resident is, there's a expectation of follow-up, whether from behalf of the council members or the Evanston Police Department. So I just wanted to ask a quick question, Commander Glue, and that is, are we still following the procedures of whomever made this complaint, that they are informed that it will be discussed at this meeting?
This person was not, because one, it was a DI, and two, they were not cooperative. So they sent it off and we tried to get in touch with them and they were not cooperative.
Okay.
So whereas we would want, even with a DI, somebody to know something was going on and so on and so forth. We try to still stay in contact with people. It may not rise the level of where with the CR.
Fair enough. So I guess just as long as that practice is being adhered to, upheld, I think that's the point of the question. And then the second thing, and I'll wait until after you get through the other one, I think from time to time, and this is all anecdotal, like I don't have anything that I can string together, but just every once in a while, we'll get one of these, and sometimes I'll just speak for myself, sometimes I'm reading it, when they're just a handful, like a couple, I can read through it, and then other times I'm doing a quick read. And I think tonight's a good example of, we're going to go into an executive session, just as a reminder to new committee members, since we've been remote for so long, that when there's something that has the potential of bubbling up, I mean, it's hard to predict what's going to be a lawsuit or not, but I think just as you're giving us an overview, it would be nice to either call an executive session and just to know, like, hey, this is something that we should be paying attention to, that it's on our radar. So just as a reminder to, members of the committee from time to time, and I think this is wonderful, great practice of our police department, that if you see something, hear something, and there is camera footage, you do have the opportunity to go in, sit with Commander Glue or any, or Chief Eddington, and watch that video and understand from a law enforcement perspective exactly what's happening at the scene. And so I've always seen a lot of value in those videos, and I hope that, moving forward, particularly as we're, new council getting up to speed, that when those issues come up, that you just let us know, just as you're doing now, and go into executive session, particularly, again, for those that come up later on with a big sticker that we're trying to figure out where did this come from and why didn't we hear about it. And sometimes I don't have a percentage. It was right here in front of us, and we just blew past it without paying attention.
Yeah, so I want to be clear, and I think that I understand that basically when something is complicated or the heads up as far as this may need that extra, that may need that extra meeting would always be appreciated by this committee.
Yes, thank you.
And to go back to the question about following up with our complainants, with a CR, we will follow up with a register, a letter.
Right.
Sent registered mail, but we will typically try to engage people and follow up every way we can, email, phone calls, and the letter. So we want to leave no stone unturned, keeping people apprised of what's going on.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I will move on to CR 21-02. The initial allegation was on May 11th, 2021. The Office of Professional Standards received an online complaint that alleged that an accused officer approached her juvenile son on his way home and questioned him about who lived in the house located at 1900 in the 1900 block of Brown. The complainant also alleged the accused officer did not advise her son that he was being audio and video recorded by a body-worn camera, and she was not notified of the alleged encounter. The complainant requested an investigation in the matter. The complainant was classified as a complaint register. So we have the rule violations, rules 1, 2, 18, and 20. We go to the summary of facts. Juvenile came home from school on the bus. He was told his mother was approached and interrogated by a police officer without a guardian present. Accused officer was in the area due to a double homicide that happened prior, and these officers were requested to be in the area. The accused officer stated that he did not speak to anyone, did not exit his vehicle while on patrol, and no body-worn camera footage was available. So they're not on the bullet point here. So basically, the investigation revealed that one officer was in the area at the time this alleged to have happened. That officer was brought in, and the investigation was done, and it was determined that that officer did not have contact with any juveniles. The investigation did not lead to locating any officers that had a contact with the juvenile. The commission reviewed it, CPRC reviewed it, and voted to move it forward to Human Services Committee for final review. And the last recommendation is the rule violations are not sustained. So at this point, if I could take some questions about this.
Councilmember Reed?
So it was determined that the kid just completely fabricated this, essentially, or?
No, I wouldn't say there was
or there was someone out there who's impersonating an officer, stopping the kid.
So our investigation did not reveal who this officer was or whoever had contact with the juvenile son. I would not characterize it that this investigation revealed that this story was fabricated. I can speak that this investigation did not reveal an officer who had contact with the juvenile son. There was a lot of police presence in the area. There is a small possibility that it may have been somebody from another agency that was in there, because this was originally a task force case, so it may have been somebody in the area doing a follow-up. Our investigation did not necessarily reveal that either, but that was always a possibility. So the thing I can speak to is, based on the information that we had, we exhausted all our leads. We could not find that officer or locate this contact. Also, there is, if this occurred, which it very well possibly did, there is a caretaker role when officers are out and about to be, hey, are you okay? Hey, if there's a juvenile, or you're talking about an area where there was a violent crime not too ahead of time, Are you going, is this your house? Okay. So there is a context where this conversation could have took place, and it's not a rule violation. And in fact, it's an officer trying to take a caretaker role. But I can only speak to this investigation did not turn up that officer. It did not locate that contact.
Any other questions or comments?
So the joking comment that I don't want to take a lot of time is we had something similar to this several years ago when a kid was pulled over on a bike right in front of his house, and there was an exchange between the officer and the individual, and then the mother got involved, and then it sort of escalated, and then later on it escalated into something else. So when I read that, that's exactly what I was referencing, like something like this starts off really, really small, and then the parent has tenacity and savvy and pushed it, and as a result of that, we were able to make some changes in how we interact with our youth, and it was a real scary flashback. So that's all I mean. So we read something like this, and it's understandable,
Yes.
and then later on, someone comes back with tenacity, and then
Yes.
it becomes,
So we will always keep an eye to these complaints with your concern in mind.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can we have a motion to accept this and place on file?
So moved.
Second.
On a roll call?
We can do a voice vote?
It's all in favor, right? I thought that's-
Roll call?
All in favor works for me. It's just putting it on file. We did it 5 minutes ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. We just do a voice vote?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I can't keep these straight. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Thank you. Okay. Now we have a member of the public who's been very patient, Jan Karlovitz.
Hello, thank you. So I heard the earlier public comments about lots of police calls, and so supposedly there's been lots of calls for service, and we spend lots of money on police. And so there was the mention of a different kind of service that I appreciated. I guess it's a lot of money, and it's just not clear how it's being spent, that it's useful. It's so much money, and it's also harmful. So I really look forward to this being different. It's not going to be different tomorrow. But I guess in the meantime, I would urge you to be careful how we spend the money we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And so,
I will
Chief
move-
Eddington, are we back? What?
Yeah, I will move item HS2, police staffing, vacancies, and crime update.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. Okay.
Good evening, Chairperson and members of the committee. You were provided with several reports, and I would like to go through them rapidly and highlight some particular issues that I think are of import tonight when we consider all this. Currently, we have 23 police officer vacancy. That's one deputy chief and 23 police officers. And over the weekend, I received the resignation paper for an additional police officer who will be joining the Northbrook Police Department the 1st of next month. And we also have 3 people unavailable for duty, one individual on light duty from an off-duty matter, and 2 officers unavailable because of an on-duty injury. I'd like to pick out some parts of the report that you were provided that's dated March 7th. This has been updated a couple of times. It was first presented to you back in December. We've updated some of the numbers. Currently, we're 23 sworn officers down and 9 civilians. And as we go through this report, where we get to the crime section, I want to be clear that when we migrated from IUCR to NIBRS, that has an impact on the numbers. There's multiple counts for each event, so that there's going to be bigger numbers. But I think that there are specific numbers inside those. If you look at the bottom of the page where it talks about violent crimes, shows a similar pattern to overall crime, 16 through 21. I think if you look at the robberies in 2021 and the aggravated assaults and batteries in 2020 were the drivers of those 2 years, which should be of significant concern to us. Calls for service and officer activity. I think that the one thing that I would like to point out in that chart, especially the lower half, when we compare ourselves to other communities, we're receiving about 1.1 calls per person versus no one of the other suburbs even break one. And so we're a busy department with a lot of calls being answered. And I think that one of the things that would like to point out is in the context of who we are in the city of Evanston, with the institutions that call Evanston home, like Albany Care, like Greenwood Care, like the Rice Center, these are called generators. When we bring in those special needs populations, the police and fire departments are coming by to visit. That's unavoidable. Any questions about that portion of the report that I can answer?
Really? Sure. Thank you. It was very comprehensive, just saying thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I do want to point out that I think under our current system, having those facilities in the city, it may be unavoidable under our current system that police are going to get involved, but certainly to think that the only response that we can have for folks, and I know this isn't what you're saying, but just to level set here, the only response that we have for folks who are mentally ill or suffering from other disabilities is not the police. And hopefully I think that's where a lot of discussions both locally and nationally are going, as to how can we better serve those folks without having to burden the police department, for folks who are having, whatever issues that they're having in the moment. So I do want to go on to, I'm seeing here, we get the calls for service. So, okay. I do see a bit here of what I was looking for that gives the, going back, I guess, so thank you, from 1991 to now, and it gives the number of sworn officers and crime index. Can you break down for me and the public what the crime index number represents?
Certainly. If I may, council member.
Are you not there yet?
We're not there yet,
Okay.
but I do want to address the first part of your comments, if I may.
Sure.
First of all, I want to say that the Evanston Police Department is in complete support of alternate ways to address people in mental health crises. I think one of the things that I'm completely enthusiastic about is the living room concept, because if you've had a loved one, a family member involved in one of these events, the last place you want them to go is to some place that's brightly lit, noisy, and chaotic. That's not going to help. It's just not going to help. And so that soft approach, I think, is exceptional, and I'm looking forward for that to be implemented. But one of the things I would want to point out is in the institutions that I've mentioned that are already here in town already provide mental health services at some level. The police department gets involved when something else happens. It's like just in over the weekend and today, there were 6 missing persons reports from Albany Care. I mean, once again, it's not, we're past mental health, they're gone. So you call the cops, see if you can find this person. And so it's that type of, we don't want to interject in the mental health. There are people that are much better able to address that than us, but we do get involved when something additional happens. Thank you. I wanted, before we got to your question, sir, I wanted to just touch on the training aspects of the officers that we've attributed to other departments, and I think this is significant for the members to at least be exposed to. In the 22 officers we've lost at the preparation of this report, that represents 16,584 hours out the door of training and experience. When you add up that these individuals, when you look at their years of experience and add them up, it's 137 years of law enforcement experience. That's a lot of, to use a sports analogy, a lot of turns at bat. You know what you're doing. You've got an experience base that allows you to be a more complete police officer. Included in that is the rather expensive training that we find ourselves necessary now. Frankly, most of our cases involve some type of data, some type of cell phone analysis. That training, that week-long training costs the city $3,800 just in tuition before we consider salaries. And so as I attempt to paint this picture of how all these things are interwoven, staffing and morale, I think that as we look at the expense of having very talented, trained officers out the door is a continuing expense that the city will have to shoulder for the foreseeable future. Now, Council Member, to the point of your question, and could you please restate that again so I answer specifically what you need to want to know?
Yeah, if I got ahead of your presentation, my apologies.
No worries.
Okay, I'll let you go ahead. But so I just wanted you to, for myself and for the community, to help folks understand how the crime index is calculated. I know it's a national standard, and I think it takes into account 8 criteria, 8 classifications of crime. So if you want to explain how that's...
Certainly. What it does is it measures Part 1 and Part 2 crimes in the IUCR system. NIBRS, which we've migrated to, considers more included offenses, so the numbers go up. So if there was a homicide, but there was a weapon used, we would include the aggravated battery, and so this one event may get several check marks for crime. And so we did... Overall, crime may have gone up, but the numbers are larger. And so I think that's the system that's being nationalized now. That's the system the Evanston Police Department's participating in. But I think there were several specific instances where we could show that crime has risen. And as we look at this table, there's another thing that I want to direct the council's attention to is the timeline between 2014 and 2019. And in those, 2014 was the highest manpower, 2016 was the lowest crime rate, and in 2019, 2020 and 2021, I want to point to a specific variant that's not exactly reflected in the chart. What the Evanston Police Department has done for a number of years is deployed a summer plan. We shifted units to primarily the afternoon hours. We hired back additional personnel during those afternoon hours, and we ran that from Memorial Day to Labor Day. In the last 3 years where we've seen the significant uptick in crime, that program for budgetary reasons has been significantly reduced. And if I can highlight this in hours, in 2017, there were 735 hours spent on beat 89. That the approximate cost of $45,000. In 2021, there were 252 hours expended for a cost of $9,000. And so you're not going to get the crime suppression a robust program if you spend 45 and then you spend 9 and think you're going to get the same result. That's just not going to happen. And so I want to point out that those budget restrictions over time have had a significant impact. Additionally, when we reduced staff in 2020 based on COVID concerns, that was a significant downgrade of 14 personnel, and now we start counting again. That those 14 personnel have nothing to do with the numbers I gave you tonight. My starting point is different than that, but in that historical perspective, we've stair-stepped down in our staffing. And so as we look at those numbers over time, Council Member, I think you can see as the available manpower has been reduced to apply to our concept of hotspot policing, our concept of deployment, there has been a reaction in the uptick of crime.
I might be looking at a different chart than you're discussing right now, but right now I'm looking at page 65 of the package. So the first year listed, 1991, has a crime index of 6,303. My understanding is that in this case, the crime index going down is a good thing.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And it seems like we've been on a fairly, other than 2021, and maybe some other outliers, but a fairly steady march down. Going from 6,000, a crime index of 6,303 in 1991 to half that in 2021, and then most years before that being, even a third of that. What I do see is spikes seemingly around, particularly once you get into the later 2000s and out of the 90s, it seems like there's a spike, particularly in homicides, as we, in 2010, not too long after the mortgage crisis, and I think that's about the time that it hit folks here hardest. So and homicides have been, fairly low, every so often. Like this year we had 6, in 2010 we had 6, but fairly steady. So crime has been steadily going down. Homicides have kind of fluctuated. That happens. But the number of sworn officers has more or less stayed the same since the 90s. More or less. We've from 1991 to now, we have a reduction of 3 officers. But a reduction in crime that far outpaces an overall reduction that is more substantial than that. So it seems as though there isn't a correlation between the number of sworn officers that we have and crime. It seems that they're just following this, and I think having even further, this is really good. 2 decades of data 3 decades. 3 decades of data is fairly substantial. So thank you for that. If we need to go back further, we could go back further, but it seems pretty substantial that number of police officers is the same. Crime has gone way down. Doesn't seem to be a strong correlation between the two. And maybe we should start looking outside of the police department to what led to this reduction in crime, what led to the spike in 2021.
If I may, sir, I think there's some things that we could look inside the police department for. I think we're much more sophisticated in the application of our manpower resources now than then. If you look at where that crime really began to dip, and I'm most familiar with 2007 on, as we refined our deployment system and attempted to get the officers to where we projected crimes were going to be, that has had a substantial impact. So I would suggest to you one explanation is we are much more sophisticated at the deployment of those very expensive personnel resources to address crime in a sense before it happens. Because once again, I would much prefer that I prevent the crime, that way you're not victimized. That's a much better outcome than, well, I made the arrest to the person who hurt you, you're still hurt. So what our real goal is to deploy the police resources in a manner so as to prevent victimization.
So what you're saying is that when you look at this data, what you see is that our department has gotten more efficient with less. It's kind of like the Mitt Romney, Barack Obama debate moment where, of course, we have less bayonets and other stuff. So is that what you're saying?
To a degree, sir. What I'm saying is that you have substantially less people in 20 and 21 than you had prior. And we're really getting hammered right now with the attrition of trained personnel to other jurisdictions. And so in that context, I think we're going to see a continuing uptick in crime because we don't have the resources to apply to the hot spots like we did before. As we have and in the context of what's going on inside the police department, many of the officers that we've lost in this last 24-month period have come from our specialized units, detectives, special operations, the tactical unit. We have not backfilled those positions because we don't have enough police officers, patrol officers to cover the shifts. And so those specialties are not being restaffed and retrained. And so I'm saying there's a lot going on inside the department that's not clear from the numbers we're looking here. And I think those things have impact on these numbers that we haven't completely seen yet.
Yeah, so that leads me to wonder also, I mean, I see that we have the budgeted sworn officers, but maybe the actuals would have been nice as well to include in here, because even this year we have 154 budgeted. Supposedly, we don't have actually 154 on the streets.
Yes.
And the same thing with the years prior. We had that budgeted, but that's not how many were on the streets. So that might be helpful. And given, I'd also be interested in seeing our the budget for these years and what the cost for the department was. And as we know, we're increasing more technology. We just bought drones and body camera and all these things that I would think would lead to efficiencies that could reduce, see a reduction in crime. And then also the definition of crime. I mean, it is against the law. If I worked at Target or some business for my homeowner, if for my employer to steal wages or to not pay me what my wage is, but we don't send police officers out to investigate wage theft. Do we? We don't have a bureau, but we do have a bureau that investigates drug dealers. We don't really investigate, certain types of crime that are just as destructive as, drugs and other things. And we don't have, so we don't really measure the full weight of crime that has taken place in our city, unless we're going to have a white collar crime division in the police department that focuses on other kind of crime as well. But thank you for this.
If I may, back to your point on the number of officers who are actually here, that will be a substantial research project in that, just like as we chatting tonight, the number since I saw you last month has changed. It's going to change again before I see you next month. And so to hit that moving target over multiple years would be extremely difficult. I will go back and ask the administrative staff if we can pick whatever the low number was in that year. That might be more doable and provided to you in a much more relevant time frame than, because it would literally be a week-by-week evaluation.
Or just an average for the year.
Let me talk to them and see what's
look
doable.
At the month by month and then calculate whatever the average would be.
So let's let Councilmember Braithwaite chime in here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wasn't clear where in the data that was published you were pointing your questions at, and we can talk about that after the meeting. But to Chief, I thought this was all very interesting. What I'm looking at, specifically is on page 64, in where you compare the city of Evanston to the other neighboring suburbs. And so for those that are here behind the dais and those at home, out of Arlington Heights, Aurora, Elgin, Evanston, Naperville, and Skokie, we have the highest calls per resident. And so in each of the situations that I just mentioned, Arlington Heights, Aurora, for their population, they're all showing a lower percentage of calls for service versus Evanston. So we have 74 population, 74,000, but we have 84 calls for service, which when we're down 20, and I can't remember, so I know that the numbers stagger between sworn officers, but the fact is we're still down a number of officers, and our calls are more than any other neighboring suburb. So I'm not sure what analogy you were walking down. For me, that's a concern. And I know we're going to go into executive session and talk about that, but I know sometimes we get really lost in the conversation of, the number of officers and also the budget. And I think, for me, the most important subject is how do we keep people safe in our town? And I don't ever want us to lose sight of that. And I'll say it again, there are some conversations about the numbers of our police force, there's some conversations about our budget, but when I look at the number of calls based on our number of population, and that's higher than any other suburb neighboring, our number one job is to keep our public safe, and I don't want to lose sight of that. So I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have in executive session so we don't lose sight of that fact. And I just want to thank you very much for a comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, if I can just chime in, I do want to note that these aren't our neighboring communities. I've never crossed the border from Evanston to Arlington Heights, Aurora, Elgin, Naperville, Skokie, yes. And I will also say that from my understanding, and I haven't done this research in a few years at this point, but our police department is also larger than all of these police departments as well. I think per capita, our police department is larger than Arlington Heights, Aurora, Elgin, Naperville. Maybe you don't know that off the top of your head, and maybe I don't know that, but my recollection is that is the case, that we also have a larger per capita police department than, I would say, I think all of the communities listed here.
If I may, we probably would if we were fully staffed, but I think one of the things that's included in those numbers is it depends on how you measure. Are you measuring the entire complement of the police department, including civilians, and so that can shape that either way. And so it's something we could investigate, but we do have a high number of police officers when we're fully staffed, but a lot of that is driven by the call load is substantial here. And once again, if you have that level of call load with this low number of officers, you're basically subtracting the time available for proactive policing, to get to the hot spots, to sit there, to make sure nothing's going on, because there's only so much time in an officer's day, and that if we're down on calls, we're not proactively attempting to disrupt the crime pattern.
Yeah, thank you. And then lastly, how is it, so to that point, I will say I'd love to see the data. If that's a conclusion that you made, if our crime index is down, I want to see what the calls for service were for that year and the number of officers, to see if there really is a correlation between the number of calls for service and that tying up time to do preventative work, and if that actually has an effect on crime that we can measure with the crime index. But to this point, how is a call for service calculated? What do we count as a call? Obviously, it's a call for service, but what is every call that comes in a call for service, or is an officer, if they are on the street and they observe something and that ends up in an arrest, or it doesn't, does that count as how is that calculated in this call for service model? And then are we also including, is this just calls for the police department, or is this calls to 911 overall that would include fire department calls?
I'll try to answer this in reverse order.
Sure.
No, this does not include fire department calls. This is police-related matters. Also, if we dispatch or the officers see something on scene and calls it in, it's a call for service. If you call up and say, send the police to my house, or send the police, even what was discussed earlier by Commander Glue, the person who called about the parking complaint, it's a call for service. And so that activity is in here, and it's just police, not anything else. Now, if we handle something over the phone and nobody goes, it's not a call for service.
Okay, but an officer stopping someone on the street counts as a call for service.
Now I'll clarify that. I'm not sure how the new CAD system is measuring that.
Okay, thank you.
But generally, police-initiated activities are included in calls for service.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burns.
Thanks, Chief, for this report. I guess what I would, and I'm really reserving a lot of these lines of questions until we get a kind of permanent city manager in place. But this is something that I'm going to be a real stickler on moving forward, not just in the police department, but every department, is just to really understand how success is measured. I think if the public and also this body understood how success was measured, in every department, then these conversations would be easier, right? Because we would agree on those measures. And then it's very clear, end of year, month by month, are we hitting those or are we not? I think the issue is a lot of subjectivity, right? It just depends on, we haven't agreed on what those measures of success are. To me, you know, if I'm a police chief, one of the measures is, all right, how quickly are we able to respond to service calls, and how often are we able to stop things in the act? How often are we able to stop things before they occur, right? How often does a crime occur and we're able to, within a certain amount of time, identify and apprehend the offender, right? These are things that would be on my mind. And so and you don't have to really answer this now, but that's a question that I have. And if it's obviously I'm 10 months in or whatever it is, so that if that's in another report that we get at some point in the year, I'd love to see that type of data. And then aside from that, I think we're having a really important conversation on our Reimagining Public Safety Committee. And a lot of that ties into this discussion as well, which is, again, just, thinking through who is the best public servant to send to certain service calls, whether it's mental health related or nuisance and disturbance related. And a lot of this, to me, relates to this discussion as well. And so I'm glad we're having both of these discussions at the same time, because I think what we learned from our Reimagining Public Safety Committee, as well as through these reports, will help us figure out what is a good staffing level for the police department, what is a good staffing level for the community responder model, or division if we end up adopting one. But I appreciate this report. This is really good information. Thank you.
And sir, if I may, the traditional response from police agencies is going to be, and myself included, is I'm very focused on Part 1 crime numbers. To summarize what I think I do for a living, is there less victims this year than there were last year? That's all I want to know. I mean, and really, it's an expensive endeavor to get there, but that's really the motivation. How are we doing what we do to prevent victimization? And that's a very complex evaluation, because it has to do with, for instance, decisions that are made outside this building. For instance, what is the Cook County State's Attorney's Office doing about repeat gun offenders? If they're doing what they're doing now, I would suggest it's not working. But we can't directly fix that. And so now how are we adjusting what we're doing to function in that environment? How does that impact on our Part 1 crime and victimization when perhaps other entities in the criminal justice system aren't going full speed ahead? But I think the clearance rate is something we can provide you with. The response times is something we can provide you with, which are concrete metrics that you can say, Chief, I'm really not interested in that metric. I am interested in that metric. And once again, that will hone down what gets to the council.
Yeah, I would just say that I think those are really good metrics. I think we need to add to the metrics. And I would take it back to, again, things I think we're more in control of, as opposed to things that I think have more to do with what's happening regionally, right? What are some things that our officers are more directly in control of? Because that's tough. If you're only watching victimization, again, I think that's just, we can measure it, but I think there's some other metrics that are more closely related to things that our officers can control. And I'd love to have a really robust discussion about that in the coming months. Again, I've held back from having these discussions until we have a permanent city manager in place, because I'm really going to be looking for that individual to usher in some of these new ways of measuring productivity, measuring outcomes and success, and using that to inform decisions like this, because these are really difficult discussions to have, because I don't think we're having it from a metric standpoint, which leaves too much in the air for individual interpretations and how styles of policing we may like and think helps to keep the public safe, but we can't prove anything out. It makes these discussions difficult, at least for me. But again, I appreciate the report, and I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion.
If I may, a lot of police research, especially when it's this specific and individualized, takes a lot of time. And so if I may impose upon you to please start to answer the questions, because the staff that I will assign to do that research and come up with those answers is going to be here long after I'm gone. And they're going to give the answer, whether it's to me or the next chief of police. So if we can begin to look at the issues, the metrics that you're interested in, the sooner we can start the research to have answers for the next chief, for the next city manager. And if we can begin to work on those and incorporate some of those now, that's less stuff for the new guys to do.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reed?
One last thing. Thank you, and I'm really glad about that answer there, because part one crime, I think, is the crime that most of us are most concerned about. You know, it's burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, arson, human trafficking, all that kind of stuff. The really dark stuff that causes real pain to other people. So I would love to see an analysis similar to what we did here, specifically of part one crime, because if we're including, you know, traffic stops for someone who, you know, didn't get their tail light fixed, that's not crime that I'm necessarily worried about and that I need, you know, tracked here with our officers. But homicide, aggravated assault, those kind of things, motor vehicle theft, that's the kind of crime that that I think police officers are most equipped to handle. And so I'd just love to see that analysis.
In compared to what, sir?
The number of officers on the force.
Okay, part one crime compared to police staffing.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Is that everything everybody has? Okay. Then can we have a voice vote to accept and place on file this update? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Okay. Thank you, Chief, and we'll see you in a minute.
Yes.
Okay. So we need someone to make a motion to take us into executive session.
I move that we go into executive session.
You want to read the
Oh,
official?
sure. I guess I can. Pursuant to 5 Illinois Compiled Statute 20-2A, I move the Rules Committee this is Human Services, convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel. The agenda item is permitted subject to considered executive session and is enumerated exception under the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
Should we add collective bargaining?
Beg your pardon?
Should we add collective bargaining as one of the exemptions?
It's not one of those cited, but if you want me to read the whole thing, I can.
Just as far as relevance to the.
I'll just go ahead and read what's stated. So the exemptions, public body may hold closed meetings to consider the following: appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal specific of employees to the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on complaint lodged against employee, public body against the legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Or do we need a roll call for that?
We don't need a roll. Actually, I think for executive session we may.
Do
But
a roll, I think.
whatever it is, I vote no.
Okay. So let's do a roll call.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Aye. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns. Aye. Councilmember Reed.
No.
Three, yeah, executive session.